Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Derek Johnson with Alliance Careers. I am the Director of Recruiting here, and thanks for joining us at the Setting Your Sights, Demystifying the Military Transition webinar. My name is Derek. As I said, I've transitioned from the Army. Like I know some of you are considering a transition from the military. Perhaps you're many years out and you're just considering it and you're trying to figure out what does that next step look like, or maybe you're only a few months and you're trying to figure out what exactly is the best course of action. And in order for us to have a really productive conversation, I'm going to turn it over to the president and CEO of Alliance Careers, Mr. John Todd, who has been in your shoes as a transitioning military officer, a potential transitioning military officer. He's also owned businesses where he's hired junior military officers. And right now, as I mentioned, he is the CEO of a transitioning military officer firm. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to John to just share his unique perspective to get us kicked off. John?
Hey, thanks so much, Derek. And it's my pleasure to be here tonight. And as Derek said, we hope to demystify this thing called the transition. And it is something that we have watched from different vantage points for a number of years. But I'm really excited to tell you that the demand for a junior military officer has never been greater than it is right now. And again, I've watched this industry from the early 80s to today, and that's a really powerful statement to make. When the transition goes well, and I know many people that have made it, I don't know anyone that will ever look back on it and question, whether or not it was the right call. The upside potential is pretty huge. And, we like to say the two great benefits of a successful transition is higher quality of life for you and your loved ones, and really the opportunity to have control of your life. Now, that being said, even though there's a great upside, it is a challenging transition. I mean, and here's some hard numbers. Over 50% of transitioning junior military officers will leave their first job before it's successful. And that's a really important fact, and it's something that makes this transition, a little bit challenging. Now, in Alliance here, we really focus on trying to get it right the first time. And I know this sounds kind of hokey, but we often say that what happens to our candidates in the first 3 to 5 years in their transition can often influence how that person, lives the next 30 to 50 years. We are that adamant about the importance of the transition going well. But bottom line, it's a great time to make this transition. The demand for talent is just unmatched. So, Derek, that's what I'd say about where we are, and that's how I'd set up this transition.
Thank you so much, John. And as I said in the beginning, we have people that are joining our conversation right now, and thanks again for listening in, that are in different stages in that decision-making process, right? And so the number one question that I would have for you is how to go about making that decision of should I get in, or should I get out, or should I stay in? And if I get out, when is the best time?
No, absolutely. And I think anybody who's worn the uniform that enjoyed their time serving wrestled with this decision. And the first thing I would say right off the bat is if you want to stay in the military, we sure hope you stay in. We, as an American, as a patriot, we need great people, great talent to stay in the military. But that's a really tough personal decision that if you're listening to this webinar, you're obviously considering it, and we respect that. The only time I would tell you that it's not probably wise to stay in is if the only reason why you're staying is the fear of the unknown. There's so many great things about the military that are unique, but I just hope that you don't hesitate, because you just don't know if what you have done will prepare you for this next chapter. Because I can tell you that it absolutely it will, and it has. Everyone, takes off the uniform at some point. For me, the epiphany of, I served 7.5 years of active duty, 6 straight at Fort Bragg, and to me, the epiphany of getting out, was a lot of things. But I watched, I was an aide de camp. I watched a 2-star general, wrestle with the decision to get out, or the act of leaving after 35 great years of service. And so, one simple fact is everybody's going to take off the uniform at some point. So to Derek's question, when is the right time? And again, that's a personal choice. Do you make it a career? Do you not? But if you are going to get out before you get to retirement, most folks are going to get out between 4 and 10 years. The only comment that I would make is if you make that decision that you're not going to make it a career, a lot of people kind of kick that can down the road, and I would just let you know that that's for your personal goals. I mean, maybe you want to take command, or maybe there's a certain school or goal that you want to establish. But the reality is that once you get beyond 5, 6, 7 years, you're probably not going to enhance your starting position. You're not going to enhance materially your starting compensation. And if I could use probably a rough analogy, but consider yourself like a 3-year Division I football player playing for Alabama, and you just found out that after 3 years that if you went into the NFL draft next year, you'd be a first or second round draft choice. The economic decision would be to go to the draft. If you want to stay because you want to win a championship or so forth, so be it. But bottom line, it's a tough decision. We respect how hard it is. But if you do make the decision, don't procrastinate on when you get out. I mean, that window is there. We've worked with candidates successfully that have gotten out at the 11-year mark, the 12-year mark, and there's no hard number. I must be out by this date. But that my comment about your marketability doesn't materially increase after a certain point. There is a point of diminishing returns. So that would be my thoughts on that decision about stay in or stay out. Okay.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you, John. And we're going to kind of step this through, right? So the next logical question in terms of, all right, I know I'm going to make the decision, I'm going to get out, but now I need to navigate the pathways of where to go. And there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of different options for a junior military officer, very tied to the government. Obviously, as government employees, that could be a potential path, or the business route could be a path, or entrepreneurship, or you go to grad school. There's a lot of different routes you can take. So how do I determine if the corporate route is the path for me?
Absolutely. Well, this is a tough one, right? Because most people that have worn the uniform, stepped into the military immediately after college, or not much time after college. And many times their commissioning source, whether it's ROTC or a service academy, they began that program right out of high school. So their knowledge of this thing called corporate America is a little bit, it's not that established. And I always like to say a lot of military folks are amazed at how little people that have never served in the military know about the military, right? Because all they've learned about the military oftentimes comes from a movie or a book or so forth, and it's not necessarily the case. And that's the same thing about the business world. What is this thing all about? I've never had, my parents were in the military or in the business. I've never been in business. And they watch these movies, Wolf on Wall Street and things like that, and they have this perception of the business world. And bottom line is the business world is not right for every transitioning junior military officer. And that's a fact. There are some unique things about the business world that make it different than many, many other things that you can do after you take off the uniform. And so for me, 3 questions I challenge people to think about as they kind of wrestle with, what do I want to do? And the first is, do you actually enjoy leadership? I mean, not do it just because, you've been told in order to get that next promotion, you got to take that platoon, or if you're a Navy guy, you got to take that division and so forth. But do you actually enjoy the challenges? And as we very well know, the headaches of leadership. Do you like it? Second, do you have true confidence in your abilities? And then third, are you actually comfortable with the scoreboard? Okay. And I think if you answer yes to those 3 questions, yes, you like leadership, yes, you believe in yourself, and yes, you're comfortable with the scoreboard, the business world could be a very viable option for you. And here's why. There is no pathway outside of the military that will stretch you and give you the same type of leadership opportunities that the business world gives. None. It is boundless. Okay, I often say, to West Point graduates, when you go to your 10-year reunion, the happiest folks in the room are oftentimes FBI agents. When you go to your 20-year reunion, sometimes the most disappointed are FBI agents, because what they did from year 10 to year 20 after graduation is not nearly what can happen when you go into the business world. Leadership is the key to success in business, and it's valued. Do you believe in yourself? Yeah, you've been in logistics. Can you do something other than supply chain? Absolutely, you can, but you may have to stretch yourself. Yeah, I was in military intelligence. Can I do something other than going to go work for the intel community? I can go on and on. My point is that there are a lot of things to do, but it's a new world, but you have to believe in yourself. And then the scoreboard, I always like to say military folks have this love-hate relationship, especially top tier ones, with the military pay chart, right? You work your tail off, you do all these wonderful things, but you can't get a promotion, ahead of your peers until you're well into your career, until typically the 04 mark on the wall, and that can be frustrating. Well, in the business world, we're going to pay you by what you do. We're going to reward performance, and if you like the scoreboard, if you believe in yourself, it's a great place to be. So, again, very personal choice. I would just tell you that leadership, confidence, and the willingness to compete, if you have that in your DNA, I don't know if there's a better place than the business world. So that's what I'd say, Derek, on that one.
Right on. I'm ready to do it all over again, right? And I want to also add that we're going to be walking through a lot of the most common questions, but if you have other questions that come up as we're having this conversation and you want to tap them into the chat or into the Q&A box down there, please do, and we will address those at the end, as many as we can. So just wanted to add that as well. But the next logical question, John, if we are going to say that our goal is the business world, is, well, what kinds of business career fields are available? I know I ended up the sales route, which, talk about stretching yourself. That was a stretch for me as an armor officer going that way. So could you elaborate a little bit on the different pathways that are available to the transitioning military officer?
Absolutely. Well, there's many. And that's what's so exciting, right? You can pick whatever lane you want. There are jobs out there that are, 8 to 5, 9 to 5 kind of jobs, and you can kind of take your foot off the gas. There are jobs that are much more high potential, much more fast paced. The first question I would tell you right off the bat is, do you want to be a generalist or a specialist? Hey, I want to go into cybersecurity. That's my lane. That's what I want to do. I don't care about leading. I just want to go into cybersecurity. I can tell you our expertise with Alliance is we work specifically with what we call high potential opportunities. And these are, if you want to, think about the difference between a warrant officer versus a commission officer, the kind of roles that are growable and developmental. And as you develop in the business world and you truly become a senior leader, you're going to be cross-functional. It's not like, Derek, you were an armor officer and I'm going to be stuck as an armor officer for X number of years. Eventually, when you become a senior leader, you're going to manage and lead multiple function areas. But for us, in dealing with senior executives, if we've heard this once, we've heard this 1,000 times. I don't care what this junior military officer did in the military. Give me somebody with leadership, character, and drive. And if I can have those things, those skills, I can teach in my industry. But it's really, really hard to teach somebody leadership, character, and drive. So I would break down the types of opportunities into 3 big buckets. The first would be what we'd call technical leadership skills. Okay, skills that require, maybe an engineering degree or maybe a service academy graduate that had to fight through all those science classes and those math classes, but somebody that has maybe not, a design engineer or something like that, but has the technical competency where they can lead people. The second is kind of your path, Derek, sales leading to management. Again, a lot of people have this negative connotation to sales. I bought my car from a sleazy salesperson. Oh, I'm getting hit up by this insurance salesperson. Well, this is very different. We're talking about high-end relationship, business-to-business selling, like your experience, Derek, which, we'll probably give you a chance to talk more about in the medical side, in other places, but sales leading to management. And then the third, which is a huge umbrella, is what we'd call just general operations management, opportunities that are maybe in manufacturing, general manager tracks, and so forth. So those are 3 broad areas, but let me put a little bit more be a little more specific, okay, to kind of help out folks that are sitting back there and say, what does all that mean? Technical leadership role. All right. True example. We work with the largest steel company in North America. Years ago, they came to us and they said, gosh, we would really love to see a metallurgist come through your pipeline. Do you have any metallurgists? And we said, we're sorry. Metallurgists are pretty rare in our world. But if you're looking for a leader, come talk to us. And finally, they realized, and they said, you know what? We can teach a leader how to make steel a whole lot easier than we can make a metallurgist be a leader. And so that particular company has hired folks for all types of roles, ultimately designed to become a leader. In fact, the very first candidate that we ever placed in this particular company, 7 or 8 years later, was managing, a $200 million division and making probably close to 7 digits a year. Okay, basically running an autonomous business unit, starting out as a leader. Again, this particular individual wasn't a hard engineer, was a West Point graduate, but had that technical degree. And that is what we're talking about as a technical leader, somebody that has technical competency, but also great leadership skills. A lot of different roles in that capacity. Sales leading to management. There's a company that I know everybody's familiar with that we work with very well and for many years, Johnson & Johnson. Some of you may be aware that the CEO of Johnson & Johnson is a West Point graduate, Alex Gorsky, who has done an amazing job leading one of the greatest companies in the world. Alex Gorsky started out in a sales role. The kind of roles that we work with Johnson & Johnson are medical device opportunities, very similar to the role that the CEO worked at. But these are roles that you have to come in there, and obviously you have to be an individual producer first. But once you're an individual producer, they need you to be a leader. Okay, so med device opportunities, we have technical sales opportunities, but a lot of roles that require high-end relationship selling skills. And then third, operations. And again, this can cover so many different options, so many different areas, but I'll give you an example of one, a company you've probably never heard of, a national company, a multi-billion-dollar-a-year company that has close to 500 different profit centers all across the country. They have a program that is designed to take a junior military officer and get them spun up and basically give them what I call a real world MBA, teach them how to learn the nuts and bolts of how to run a multi-million-dollar business, everything from financials to sales to inventory management, managing people. And after a 3-year program where you're going to be paid, competitively, they're going to turn you over and, give you the keys to running a multi-million-dollar profit center. And not that, we like to talk, we'll talk a little bit about compensation, a good lead in, but the average compensation for profit center in this particular company, the average, okay, and most of thankfully, the candidates we work with, they're not average, was a little over $260,000 last year. So that's the kind of roles that we're talking about. So it's across the board. The common thread with whether it's technical leadership, whether it's sales leading to management, whether it's an operational management role, is that leadership aspect. To go in there, you're going to have to learn an industry, you're going to have to contribute, but that's what we're talking about. So there are definitely some great jobs that are out there. And, whatever your source of commissioning, the first time you put on a uniform to the last day you take it off, you have been developing that leadership, that character and drive, which, like I said, is in great demand in the business world.
Absolutely. Well, like you mentioned, John, a great segue into our next question about compensation, right? Because you mentioned $260,000 a year as a mark on the wall as the average. Many people's antennae are going to go up right away, I think, when we hear that. But let's bring it back to that day one, right? We're going to be making this transition into the military. What are our expectations in terms of compensation?
Sure, absolutely. Well, what I would say is, depending on where you are, depending on what your specialty is, what community you serve in, I would keep your expectations on year 1 and year 2 modest. Okay. And before we throw out numbers, let me just tell you that you can't have it both ways, right? Meaning that if you're a top performer in the military, you're probably frustrated by the pay chart. Well, the business world, what's exciting about it is top performers get paid more than poor performers. And in this performance-based environment, performance-based compensation, merit-based promotion, there is variable compensation, okay? So there's a lot of things that make up that compensation. And, Starts with obviously a base salary. That first starting point may have a sign-on bonus that can be negotiated. Almost all high potential opportunities are going to have some form of a performance bonus, how well you do. Sometimes that performance bonus is tied to you individually only. Sometimes it's a combination of your individual performance versus your team performance. It'll vary based off of the company and your role, but there'll be a performance-based component to it, that a bonus out there. You'll often get a target of what they hope to make you make if you are a solid performer. Oftentimes, if you're in a great company, you may have the opportunity to benefit from company-wide profit sharing. Sometimes you'll have the opportunity to receive some form of equity on a publicly traded company, stock options with strike prices that can be very favorable. If it's a privately owned company, you may be able to earn some degree of equity. Some companies have something called an ESOP. But the point that I'm trying to emphasize is compensation is performance-based and it's variable. And if you're a high performer, and back to what I said earlier, if you like that scoreboard, money is the worst thing, is the least thing you need to worry about. So
Right.
One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of JMOs make in this transition is they overvalue their year one compensation because they compare it in the business world, because they compare it to what they can make as a GS whatever working for the government. And they don't factor where they can be at the 5-year mark. They are overly optimistic on year one, and they don't appreciate what you can do in year 5. But for us, just throw out some rough numbers. Our last hiring conference, we saw offers that were probably, maybe 80 to 120. That's a huge bandwidth that we're talking about, but that's what we're talking about. But 5 years into your transition, if you're in a developmental opportunity, we would firmly expect that you double your compensation. That is certainly within your grasp if you put your head down and you work hard and you're in the right kind of an opportunity. So, but again, I think when you look at compensation as the pluses and minuses to the transition, in the next 5 years in the transition, if you find the right job and you're in a high potential opportunity, it'll work out well. But the variable part of it is a really key part of it. And again, if you're a top performer, if you're an A performer, if you're a top tier officer, you'll embrace it. If you're a C player, that's why I said the business world may not be right for you. I mean, there's places to hide in the government that you can't hide in the business world, period. But if you're good and you're willing to show it, trust me, especially in this environment where it is an historic challenge to find, retain, and take care of top performers. So That's a little bit about compensation, Derek.
Yeah, for sure. And I know we've been having some people join throughout our conversation. I just want to remind, if you have any additional questions that may not come up throughout the course of our conversation, please put them into the Q&A box and we'll be happy to get to those at the end. So kind of backpedaling a little bit, John, earlier you had mentioned that there's many JMOs, junior military officers, that first job, it doesn't work out, right? So why do you think that might be?
Well, it really is something that drives our program. It's really the reason why we started the program, because that failure rate happens with such regularity. I mean, when you think about it, what we really put as a mark on the wall is that 2-year retention. And the reason why we do is because if you leave before the 2-year mark to find a second job, oftentimes, you're having to do some explaining about what happened. Why did it not work out? And oftentimes it's just a lateral move. And all you did is you just lost a little bit of time. So, we have a huge emphasis on getting it right the first time. And our philosophy is, as you sit back and you think about where your career is going to go, you can't plot it down. You can't say in 10 years, I'm going to be here, 20 years, I'm going to be here. It's just too hard to do. But what we do know is that if you can have that success in those first few years, it's pretty dynamic. And again, that emphasis on the first 3 to 5 years. And so, to your question, Derek, for us, it's about getting it right and doing a thorough search. And obviously, there's a lot of challenges with this transition. There's timeline issues and, working your last job here or there, whatever. We're big believers on an alliance hiring conference, and not, just primarily because it allows you in a really short period of time to compare and contrast. And so I think a lot of candidates deprive themselves of that opportunity. And well, Derek, you lived it.
Right.
Could you, take a little moment and share a little bit about your experience and what that was like?
For sure. Thanks, John. And I mentioned in the beginning, I'm director of recruiting at Alliance, but I was also an Alliance alum. So I've come through this process back in 2014. I was a transitioning junior military officer, like many of you. Graduated from West Point in 2009. Did my 5 years. I was not sure if I was going to get out or not, but to John's point, I didn't think I was going to make it 20. So I wanted to make it sooner to maximize my potential in that trajectory going forward. And I partnered with Alliance early in that decision-making process, got to experience the program. But when I came to the conference, I really didn't know as an armor officer what I wanted to do. I knew I had leadership experience. I know I had a deployment under my belt, and I wanted to still continue in leadership, but I thought it would be something much more in my comfort zone: operations, leaderships, managing small teams, getting results through others, things that are in our wheelhouse as military officers. And so that's what I brought to the table. But I was quickly coached to say, you don't have to overly limit yourself even to one industry or one kind of job, because at the Alliance conference, we can put multiple opportunities in front of you at the same time, all aligned with your timeline, right? If you go in your own path, you may get an interview and a job offer, but that's one in hand that may expire before you get another opportunity to compare it to. And then that one's not as good. I was recently buying a car, and that happened to me a few times where I lost out on a good deal because I waited too long. So that doesn't happen in this situation, because everything happens along a certain pathway where I sat down in front of 10 different companies, all different industries, different kinds of opportunities, including sales opportunities. I alluded to that in the past. And the sales opportunities, even though that wasn't ultimately or originally my goal, I really just connected, because at the end of the day, it's about fit, right? It's about getting to know the people at the other side of that desk that are hiring managers, not just a corporate recruiter or HR representative that's screening you, but people that you're going to be working with day in and day out, your potential new boss, your potential new peers. And you're able to get to know them in that conference, in that interview, and compare to the other experiences you have. And really, at the end of that conference, you're able to whittle that list down from 10, maybe to 5, and do multiple follow-up interviews. And then you're able to have several offers in hand that you're able to look at, weighing all the variables of what's the fit, what's the industry, what's the location, what's the pay, what are the benefits. All these different components come up at one table at one time, and you're able to look at them. And I was able to make the decision that, yeah, pharmaceutical sales in Jacksonville, Florida, that was the right move for me and my family. And we relocated, and it was a great decision. And I spent 8 years in that industry before bringing us up to the present. So that was my conference experience. And John, I wanted to kind of use that as a segue. Back when I got out in 2014, there was no such thing as skill bridge internships, and that we hear about it all the time. You may have recently received an email that we now have a skill bridge internship that we're offering through Alliance. You can participate in our program and still take advantage of that internship. But it's a new thing that we are interacting with and talking to candidates really on a daily basis that are considering this. So do you have any insight that maybe broadly speaking about the internship model as we've seen it develop?
Absolutely. Well, Derek, first of all, that was a great rundown of your experience. And it emphasizes, before we talk about skill bridge, the importance of finding fit. And I think that is a relevant factor in evaluating the skill bridge program, right? The great part of the skill bridge internship is obviously it's well-intentioned. It's designed to help folks and the ability to spend more time on researching, on getting out there, so you're not so rushed and forced to make a tough decision. Because obviously, and what we often say is, you're getting ready to make one of the biggest decisions of your life. Get as prepared as possible and don't rush into it, right? So I love that part of the internship. But what we don't love about it is it kind of funnels you into one little opportunity, and sometimes you miss out on the experience that you had, Derek, of seeing 9 other opportunities. And I've been blessed to have 6 daughters, and I always tell them, I don't care who you marry, just don't marry the first guy you date, right? The big decisions you want to compare and you contrast. And so I think there's some good with the internship. I think there's some challenges, and I'm not seeing many opportunities. And quite honestly, sometimes the vetting's not always right. We had a candidate recently who came to one of our hiring conferences who left an internship, and the internship he was all excited about was down in Tampa, relocated to Tampa, and unfortunately the company went belly up, and he had to give up on the apartment that he had rented for a year and go find another job. So I think you have to pick the right one. But what I think we're trying to do with our participation with the internship is to give you the best of both worlds, to give you the opportunity to kind of focus on this transition, to make that work with us in that regard, and then also have it culminate with the same kind of experience, hopefully that you had, Derek, where you get to see and compare and contrast. So I think we're excited about our involvement with it, and I think we're going to be able to take the good and take the bad. The first candidate that we had that went through the program just came to one of our hiring conference, and one of the most competitive opportunities that we have, he was the only one to win that job. And we're really excited for him, and we're really excited about the future going forward with the Skill Bridge. If I could go back, Derek, to the question about why do people get it wrong, is they ultimately choose the wrong job that doesn't have the right fit. And for those who don't know, my particular story and why I'm so passionate about why I started this firm 19 years ago after I got a little bit lucky in business is the first job I took after spending 7.5 years on active duty, thinking I was a pretty smart officer, blah, blah, blah. I joined this big global company that the recruiting firm I worked for said was going to be great, and they downsized within 90 days. And sometimes we just choose the wrong opportunity. And I don't care how good you are, if you don't join a company that it's a good fit and it's a good company, you cannot punch your way out of it. It's just that simple. And, for us, we take our responsibility of vetting opportunities very seriously. We look for 4 things. We look at companies and we make sure that those companies are financially strong. We are crazy focused on balance sheets. Okay. Is that company strong? We're getting ready to, possibly have a recession here in a few months, right? That's the talk if you listen to all the smart people, Well, guess what? When you work with the kind of companies that we work with, they don't shrink and fold up and start whacking people. In fact, that company I was telling you about with technical leadership, they've never had a layoff in the history of the company because they have such a strong balance sheet. In fact, they look at those kind of opportunities of recession as a great opportunity to kind of jump in and start aggressively growing and taking advantage of the market. But the point is that we're looking for companies that are financially strong. We're looking for companies that are poised for growth. Hey, listen, if you want a growth opportunity, it's going to be much more likely to happen if you join a company that's going to have high growth. Okay, so we're looking for companies that are poised in their space, that are going to compete, and they're going to win. The third thing that we're focused on is we're looking for companies that truly have values that our candidates, the military candidates, because we know that the culture of a military officer is a little bit different than some parts of the world. And we focus on things beyond just greed and things like that, but companies that have truly the values that our folks can embrace. And that's a really important part that sometimes people dismiss. And then lastly, we're looking for companies that have true senior leadership buy-in about what a junior military officer can bring to the table. We're not just looking for companies, I want to hire a veteran because I'll thank them for our service. Not that we want to be dismissive of people that approach things that way, but no, we want companies that have senior leadership to understand the transferable skills that a military officer brings to the table will allow that JMO to come on board as a high potential candidate and run circles. And that only happens if senior leadership has buy-in. So, why do candidates oftentimes fail? They choose the wrong company, flat out. They choose the wrong job. They don't enjoy it. It's a tough transition, but if you get it right, it can be really exciting. So that's my thoughts on that, Derek.
Absolutely. Well, John, another really important topic to discuss is location. I mentioned in my experience that I had to move right from Virginia to Florida is where I ended up. And that was a little bit of a challenge. I had moved a lot already in my time in the military, and I was ready to not have to move again. And then it's like, all right, well, and I ended up moving again. But could you just elaborate on that a little bit? I know I'm going to get the opportunity to share me my background, but I want to give you the first shot to kind of, how do you approach that question?
Well, so, here you are, you're getting ready to start a whole new career. If you do make the decision to get out and you do make the decision to come to the business world, go all the way back to the day you got commissioned, the day you became, an O1, wherever your source of commission was. And imagine saying, I'd like to become a flag officer. I'd like to become a general. I'd love to become an admiral. I'd love to become an O6 commander, whatever your goal was. And then say, I never want to live, but I never want to live west of the Mississippi, or I never want to live east of the Mississippi. Whatever branch you served in, they'd laugh at you. They'd say, you're crazy. Come on, this is a global force. I mean, you can't do that and not be successful. Well, again, the great thing about this transition is you get to pick your lanes. Hey, listen, if you want to go back home and you want to go make $85,000 a year, you want to go make $90,000 a year in zip code 12345, and in 5 years make $94,326, and in 10 years make $102,002 and not have great growth, you can do it. But don't kid yourself. If you want to go join Johnson & Johnson, if you want to go join a national or a global company that truly is trying to hire you for a high potential position. What does that mean? It's not just kind of fancy talk and oh, this is every position has growth. I'm talking about a position that the impetus behind the hire is to bring talent into an organization to grow it. Now, why in the world would a national or global company want to bring on a high potential candidate if all you want to do is live at zip code 12345? And I'm not here to minimize people who want to go back home. We recognize the world that we live in, especially now post-COVID. Everybody wants to focus on location, and that's okay. But for us, we believe sometimes location can be the enemy of fit. Okay, we believe that your focus should be to go out there and find the right opportunity, find success, and then leverage that success to get the location of choice. And Derek, I think you're a perfect, modern example of that. What happened in your career?
Yeah, thanks, John. I mentioned before we moved to Florida from Virginia. Could have been worse places to live, but it wasn't where we wanted to be, right? I wanted to be closer to family. I'd already moved several times, having been on active duty. I've already deployed. And we had a good group of friends where we were. There was a lot of reasons to stay. But at the end of the day, we were looking at it in terms of the long-term goal. Like where did we want to be ultimately? We have to be successful now. That was our priority in the first step, right? My wife and I, we knew the fit, the opportunity, that was our first priority. And then we can find the location down the road. And to your point about relocating, when you're in a big company and you're in a company that's seeking to see you develop and grow and be promoted, it's not like the difference between the military and civilian world is whether or not you move. It's just, do you have input into it? Do you have any sort of input? Do you get to determine more about the where and the when and the why, as opposed to they tell you jump and you say how high in the military? It's different, but it doesn't mean you don't ever move. And so when I went to Florida as a pharmaceutical sales rep, my goal was really to get back to Virginia. And I was able to do that by performance. Really, at the end of the day, you have to do the job and do it well. And I was blessed that I was able to have some success in a few years as a sales rep. But my developmental path and the reason that a company comes to an alliance hiring event is because they want to invest in future leaders. They didn't hire any salesperson out of the alliance conference, and I would put myself on that list as a sales rep for a career. They hire them as a future sales leader. And so I was able to do a job as a sales representative, I would say a pretty good job. And then I was able to get promoted into a sales training position, which I ended up relocating my family to Illinois, where our headquarters were. And from there, I spent about a year in that job, and I was promoted into a regional sales manager role in 2019. And lo and behold, I got back to Virginia. So keeping kind of my ultimate goal as getting back to where I started, that allowed me to be promoted into that role. So instead of being in my ideal location on year one, where I'd still be a sales rep today, waiting for that sales manager role 8 years later, because that job never came open in my backyard. But by being flexible down the road, it allows you to promote into that higher level role. So you talk about compensation again. Well, how are you able to double that compensation in a shorter period of time? Is because you have the flexibility to promote into a role which may require you to move, but it actually might get you closer to where you want to be in the first place by having some flexibility up front. And that's what I was able to experience in my career, and my family's really been blessed from it.
No, absolutely. And, as I said, earlier, I think the 1A and the 1B great benefits of the transition is being able to provide a high quality of life for your loved ones and having some control over your life. And location matters. And we're not one of those folks that, tell you that you should be. The Marine Corps, I know we have probably some Marines that are listening today, but I love your saying that you all talk about is, bloom where you're planted. And it's a great selfless motto and principle. And that's not what we're advocating for. What we're advocating for is go find success and then leverage that success. Similarly, the job that changed my life, and I'm a kid from Boston, and my wife was born in the Bronx and raised in the DC area. My second job that changed my life brought me to the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. Never thought I'd be there, but it was transformative. And after, I got a little lucky in business and sold an Inc. 500 company, I turned to my wife and I said, pick a spot on the map, and this is where we'll live. And that's why we live in Raleigh, North Carolina today. We could give you story after story. We know that location matters for quality of life. We just advocate, don't compromise success. Don't sacrifice success for the short-term zip code. If you play long ball, and I'm not talking 20-year long ball, I'm talking 3 to 5 years, because what happens in the business world is when you're good, and Derek just gave you an example, when you're good and you earn promotions, they give you some say-so of where you want to go. Not like big Navy, not like big Army, not like how, the military personnel system, for the most part does things. So that's our thoughts on location. Does that make sense, Derek?
For sure. No, I appreciate it. And we also have a couple more questions before we get to any that you put into the chat. But we mentioned in the beginning, making that decision, we've talked about the job opportunity right away up until this point. But now I want to ask, what about continuing our education? What about an MBA, John?
Well, listen, anytime you can continue to grow, I mean, that's huge. That's obviously a big plus. I think the question that we often ask with young people when they say, I want to go get an MBA is why? Well, oftentimes the answer is because I want to be successful. Well, and I would just say, are you sure that you need to have an MBA to be successful? And the short answer, in our opinion, is no. And now, getting an executive MBA where there's a minimal opportunity cost, absolutely, that's a no-brainer. Take advantage of that if you can. But here's some facts that a lot of people don't know, is that the majority of Fortune 500 CEOs do not have an MBA. The majority of CEOs across the board do not have an MBA. I mean, we could give you an all-star list of some of the most successful business people in the world, whether it's Bezos, Jobs, we could go on the list, Branson. None of those folks have CEOs. You're in the world of performance-based. A degree on your wall is not going to guarantee success. So you got to weigh that. And again, we'll never suggest that you don't do it, but just don't think it's going to change everything. You're in a results-oriented environment, and in many ways, what you have developed and what you have learned as a leader. Well, think about that. Think about how much you have learned as a leader since you've been in the military, and compare about what you learned about leadership when you're in the classroom, whether that was in ROTC or whether that was at the service academies, and what you did in the real world. And I think that's important. The question of it is in this environment, results are going to matter, more than a degree. And you all are unique. What you've done as successful junior military officers, if you think about it, every year the country pumps out about 200,000 MBAs. 200,000. There's maybe a couple thousand top tier junior military officers that come into the business world. For every one JMO, right? Think about how many MBAs there are. It's a huge statistic difference. So it's just not necessary. So, but again, we respect anybody's decision to do it. The only time I would say that if you really want to become an investment banker, you really want to go into finance, pure finance, that you probably ought to go do what, you may want to look at going to a top tier MBA program right out the bat. It may be worth the opportunity cost. But what we described earlier, that technical leadership role that, one of our candidates within 7 years was leading a $200 million division, they didn't need an MBA. You go to work for Johnson & Johnson in a competitive sales to manager kind of role, you don't need an MBA. You want to go, that opportunity I talked about, being a profit center manager, that in 3 years you're making $260,000 plus, they're going to give you a real world MBA. So that's our position on the MBAs. Okay.
Yeah. And there's going to be companies as well that if it becomes necessary and you're doing well and you don't have an MBA right away, they're going to pay for you to get an MBA. Right.
Absolutely.
That's the other thing that happens too. So you kind of kill two birds with one stone, oftentimes. So last question, John, is we've talked a lot about the different paths that a junior military officer can consider. We've really focused on the business world, and that's where we have our expertise. But now this is the first I'm really going to talk about the junior military officer recruiting firm world and really how Alliance may differ from that environment.
Absolutely. Well, again, you all are here to learn about the transition. We're not going to spend too much time. This is not going to be an Alliance commercial, not at all. But in short, recruiting firms do have some value, right? We can sometimes bypass all those screeners and get you in front of decision makers, hiring managers. And I think Alliance, as Derek, you outlined earlier, before I started Alliance, I had seen the industry from the vantage point of not just a transitioning junior military officer, but as an Inc. 500 CEO that had hired JMOs for my general manager program, and I had used, recruiting firms to fill those positions. And, in short, I just thought that there was a need. And probably I think the biggest thing that Alliance does a little bit different is we are truly candidate focused. I mean, this firm is a give back. We have some amazing individuals, John Zornick, Roger Lush, people that have been doing this for years and years and years, that have labored selflessly trying to, as a give back. I mean, people that, this is not a get rich scheme. We're really just trying to help people make a transition. But I think the candidate focused approach is important. A long time ago, we made the decision that we're not going to work with thousands of candidates every year. We're going to be very selective. We're going to look for, just top tier folks and really roll up our sleeves and fight to make this transition successful. And, I mentioned that over 50% of transitioning military officers leave that first job before it's successful. In our 19-year history, we have had a success rate of greater than 90%. And it's not 100%. And I wish I could tell you that it was, but it's not. But it's basically twice the norm. And we really attribute it to the fact that we work with great individuals, depending on the year, but we're very selective. We work for, those truly top tier officers that we think have the God-given talent and the desire to be a senior leader someday. We are very selective with companies. We actually say no to companies if we don't feel that they're a good fit. And then I'll put our training program up against anything out there. John Zornick has developed an amazing program, and we really develop our candidates, learn about them, identify fit, prepare them for the toughest opportunities. And I think just it's a great program. And as we touched upon, it culminates with these hiring conferences, which help our candidates find the right fit. So that's our difference.
Thanks, John. And something else I've really appreciated in having been able to maintain my network with Alliance after having worked for 8 years in the pharmaceutical industry, to reconnect, having maintained that contact because of the lifetime service that's provided, and now being back on the team in this role has really been, like I mentioned, a blessing. It was the right move for my family, which is something that we do for all of our candidates in any way we can help them going forward. So John, now at this point, I want to transition to some of the questions that we've had, and the first one is I think a really great question, is a question about the reserves, right? What should people be considering? I did it. I went into the reserves, and what would be your perspective on the reserves?
Well, certainly, it's great. It's a great thing to do. There's certainly no taboo. It's not, don't do it, whatever. Our only thought on the reserves is just remember your first priority is to provide value to your employer. And some folks like you were able to do it, Derek. Some folks are able to juggle that very, very well. Sometimes people, get a little bit overboard and they put their career service ahead of the business world, but you certainly can juggle it, but just don't forget your first responsibility, aside from the responsibilities to your family, is to help out your employer and provide value. And just don't let that creep in and just become, a mediocre performer. Because even though the law gives you the protection that nobody's going to, lose their job because they're in the reserves, there's no guarantee you're going to get a promotion, so you got to earn that. So that would be my thoughts on that.
Right. Okay? Yeah. And I'll just add, there's so many, it's worth looking into, but just understand all within the context of what John said, right? Like where your ambition and where your motivation, it all needs to lean into majority of your income and your way you're going to take care of your family. is going to come from your next full-time career. But there's a way to continue your service. There's so many different kinds of roles in the reserves that you probably never even heard of. So do the research, but all within the context of your main keeping the main thing, right? Another question, John. Benefits. We get a lot of benefits in the military with TRICARE and everything that goes along with that. So how would you compare and contrast that with the civilian world?
Well, obviously the military has got, unmatched benefits. But when you look at it, the kind of companies that hire high potential top tier junior military officers, I mean, these aren't companies that are fighting to make payroll next week, right? These are companies that have tremendously strong balance sheets and very, very competitive benefits. I mean, you may pay a little bit for Johnson & Johnson's healthcare, but they're going to have profit share. They're going to have 401k benefits. I mean, they're going to have all kinds of benefits. So at the end of the day, when you work with high quality companies in the business world, especially for top tier JMOs, you're going to have Cadillac benefits for the most part. So I would not put that high on the list of concerns with the transition. Your family will be well cared for. So
right. Yeah, thanks, John. The last one I think we'll have time for. I want to make sure we're respectful of everyone's time and keep it under an hour. Is really the timeline, right? When should someone who's considering this transition really be looking to start making some moves?
Well, at least our philosophy is the sooner the better, right? Once you've made that mental commitment, we've had candidates that have worked with our program for a couple of years before we put them in front of a company. There's no magic number. We've had candidates that have gotten off the plane, after deployment in Afghanistan, and in 72 hours, we're at a hiring conference. It really will vary. But for us, time is our ally, right? And so, we would like to bring a candidate at the very beginning of their marketability to a hiring conference, right? So if you want to begin work, in 90 days from a hiring conference, that would be the earliest that we would bring you to a hiring conference. And would love to have, 6 months at least of training. Somewhere 6 to 9 months is a nice sweet spot for us. We have a great training class where we, administer Harvard Business School case studies and financial classes and a lot of assessments and things like that are really helpful. And of course, great interview preparation. So that's our thing. Don't wait till last minute. I mean, when people wait till last minute, it's rushed. And again, we can make it happen. And sometimes mission, challenges us and we have to overcome that. But I would say, once you made that decision, not necessarily when you dropped your paperwork, but when you've made that decision, that's the time to start preparing for it. So, okay.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions. I kind of paraphrased some of those, so hopefully everyone has found this helpful. We're right here at 5 of the hour. Want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I want to thank you, John, for sharing your insights. And I also want to thank everyone for jumping on this call. Hopefully it's been helpful and kind of you charting this path, right? It's the most important decision to this point in your life, probably, right? That how you're going to live the rest of your life after your service to the military and service to our country. So if you want to know more, if anything we've said about the Alliance program has piqued your interest and you want to know more, please don't hesitate to reach out. You probably received an email from me before. Give me a call. Get on our website, shoot us a web inquiry. But at the end of the day, we want to provide you some information that we can add value to your decision-making process. So I hope this has been a blessing to you, and I want everyone to have a great rest of your day or evening.